Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dominions 5 Basic Nation Analysis, and this is Early Age Fomoria. This is the nation that I started my Dominions 5 career? Can you call it a career? What I started playing Dominions 5 with, because I've really enjoyed Fomoria in Dominions 4, and I really like them in Dominions 5. They retain all of those same national strengths that they had, and which made them very, very special and not unique, I guess I would say, but a very potent force. So, it is turn 12. I've gone for a year. See, right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 provinces. Quite respectable. Could have been better. There was some bad terrain. I failed expansion once. I ran an army into this throne, just kind of in an effort to take it out, just on a gamble, and they turned out to have 4 wizards, so I got wiped out there. Actually, I failed expansion twice, I'm sorry. I also hit this province and discovered that it had some war elephants who were set to attack rear, and they trampled my commander and then trampled my troops as they fled. If they'd fought the troops head-on, I think I would have won, but hindsight is 20/20. That poor little sad sack down there is Machaca. But in any case, I do have some AI competitors, such as if you can call them that, on the field at the moment. So, it's turn 12. I have 3 palisades built. One is in the process of being upgraded to a fort. I've got a lab. I'm upgrading that one and building a temple here. Down here, nothing doing, just I have this fort. But so I'm in a really good position economically, making about 1,200 gold per turn. I have one fairly substantial but chaffy army up here of Fomorian militia that's moving to unite with my small force of remaining elites. My armies over here have basically been depleted, and over here I have my god, Baconator. Baconator the thrice-horned boar. And, well, let's talk about Fomoria a little bit by itself first. So, in terms of what Fomoria can recruit, you've got a variety of, you've got Furbolg and you've got Fomorians, and then you also have Nemedians, who are elves. Furbolg, stats-wise, very good compared to humans. Furbolg warriors, for example, just have a couple extra points of defense over humans. Their basic defense skill is 13 and their basic attack is 12. They also have a few extra hit points and a little bit more magic resistance and morale than is standard, so they're just overall much better. Mainly they pay for this with a higher recruitment point cost. Their recruitment point cost is about 50% above, or actually a little more than 50% above, what a human recruitment cost typically is. But they're excellent chaff units. They're fantastic, solid little infantry. Their downfall, they have low protection and they don't wear hats, so no head prot for them whatsoever. Arrows or slingstones to the head wipe out Furbolg, which is a problem. They do have a shield, however, so it's not as bad as it could be. Then you have Fomorians, and most Fomorian units are pretty garbage, to be honest. Fomorian militia, just chaff. The only thing they have going for them is they're pretty hefty. They have 30 hit points. Stats, bad. And they start with afflictions. So if you look at these guys here, you can see a number of these Fomorian militia have afflictions that they just started with. Limps, chest wounds, limps. These guys have not been in any combat. Chest wounds. So it's not all of them by any means, but a fraction of them start with afflictions, which also lowers their average value. Fomorian javelinists aren't terrible. They have the spear attack, which is high damage. They have high strength, high hit points, all of that stuff. And then the javelins, of course, hit like trucks as well and have fairly long range. However, like the Furbolg, they don't wear hats, so they have low head prot, very mediocre body prot, and they don't have a whole lot going for them. Fomorian warriors are a little bit better because they actually wear hats, so they have decent protection and good stats overall, but they're still size 4 giants, which means they only get 1 attack per square. It's a problem. The unmarked are your giant sacreds, or one of your giant sacreds. And they're quite a bit better because they are sacred. With 35 hit points and sacred, what that means is you can take a regeneration bless on them, and I always do when I play Fomoria. They regenerate 4 hit points per round, with decent attack and defense scores and reasonable protection, especially for the early era. They become very, very tough. Very, very solid units. Your other giant sacred is the Fomorian giant. Fomorian giants are more of the same. Except they don't wear hats. Once again, they've gone back to the hatless life. Precision, garbage, strength very high, hit points very high. So once again, a regeneration bless on these guys, they'll be regenerating 7 hit points per round, which is extremely solid, especially with that long spear they've got, allowing them to repel. Your final unit is the Nemedian Warrior, and the Nemedian Warrior is, I believe, stat-wise, it's the same as Tir na Nog's Tuatha Warriors. They're just really good. They're somewhat expensive, but they have very high defense skill, high attack skill, high magic resistance and morale, glamour, they're stealthy, and they have 50% dark vision. So they are very good. And on top of that, they have magical attacks. The only downside to them is that they're capital only, but otherwise they're extremely good units. Mage-wise, you have the Furbolg Druid, which is a research monkey. A pretty good one, too. 70 gold for 9 research. A random water, earth, or nature. So magic, not impressive. You can use them for a little bit of basic site searching and for research. Fomorian Scout, Fomorian Champion, Unmarked Champion. The Unmarked Champion is a priest, so you can use them to lead sacred groups, but they're not mages, so I prefer to use Fomorian Druids. Fomorian Druids are an extremely solid mage. Little bit pricey, but you get a lot for that price. High hit points, kind of middling to decent stats all across the board. Sacred, air magic, and then a random. These guys you can thug if you really want to, actually, because they have, like I said, okay stats, high hit points. If you took a regeneration bless, these guys can cloud trapeze in with a little bit of basic gear, a suit of armor which you can forge because you have some earth randoms, a frost brand, and a vine shield or something. And they can clear provinces very effectively. You can also jump them around enemy armies to pick off, like, smaller groups. They can be very, very effective. Nemedian Champions, they have a little bit of magic, but not enough to make them really worth it. And they're too low hit point to be useful as thugs, so I pretty much ignore Nemedian Champions. But these are your two biggest mages. They are capital only, so that is a little bit of a limitation. Fomorian Kings are supercombatants. Like, there's no way to disguise that. Very high hit points, very high strength, high magic resistance, lots and lots of leadership. Inherently shock and cold resistant, which is important. Air and death magic plus a random. This enables them to cast a lot of big battlefield spells. They can random air 4, so they can forge the air boosters natively. And it also enables them to cast the air thug spells and to cloud trapeze. So they can make themselves very, very dangerous. On top of which, especially if they random death 3, they can cast Soul Vortex, which enables them to suck life out from everyone around them and make them almost impossible to kill. So these guys are supercombatants. They're also sailing leaders because they can sail with infinitely sized armies across the oceans, and they can breathe water, and they have the gift of water breathing, so they can take troops with them underwater. On top of that, Fomorian Giants, naturally amphibious, so if you want to, you can invade the water to a limited extent with Fomorian Kings and Fomorian Giants. It's just really expensive. And Nemedian Sorceresses are kind of your biggest combat general purpose mage. They're elves, so stealthy, glamorous. They are spell singers, which means that they take an extra half round to cast spells, but they take half fatigue for casting spells. And they can Skella Spam, and they can Thunderstrike, especially if they random Air 3 or Death 3 respectively. They become very, very powerful. These other two randoms, not as useful, these water or nature randoms, but no matter what, they're always Air 2 and Death 2, so they're always solid. And as I said, they're stealthy, they have glamour, dark vision, and they're spell singers. Spellsinger becomes incredibly important in the late game because it means that you take half the fatigue for casting high-level, high-fatigue spells. Nemedian Sorceresses are fantastic at dropping Wind of Death, Wailing Winds, Plague, Storm, all those big spells, Fog Warriors, all those big meaty spells that have high fatigue costs. Nemedian Sorceresses cast them better than almost anybody else because they take half fatigue for it. On top of that, this sounds like it should give you plus 50% cast time, but it doesn't. It gives you plus half a round. So a spell, for example, if we look at our research here, we can look at some spells. So let's say Phantasmal Army, cast time 125%, right? Well, so in this case, you would think that that Spellsinger would give you plus 62.5%, right? To make it a total of about 190. It doesn't. It gives you plus 50%, so the cast time is 175%. Doesn't make a huge amount of difference for that spell, but then when you get up to, say, Fog Warriors, cast time, instead of 300%, 3 rounds, is 250%. So it's less than you would think. Bone Grinding, if they ever get up to casting Bone Grinding, well, it's only 150% cast time. Darkness, which is cast time 275%, They cast it at 325%. They get plus 50%, plus half a round instead of half of what the cast time is. So they're very good and much better than you would think, especially late game. Outside of the capital, of course, you're limited to basically Fomorian druids and Firbolg druids. But like I said, Firbolg druids are good research monkeys, and Fomorian druids are good thugs. They're also good battlecasters because they have Air 2. So you get one Nemedian sorceress who randomed Air 3. You use her to cast Storm. All of your Fomorian druids that you've built up. I have some out leading armies right now. I have one there. I have two there. You build up a bunch of them. Then they cast Summon Storm Power. So now they're Air 3, and now they can Thunderstrike. The Fomoria can generate very powerful Thunderstrike batteries fairly quickly. That said, personally, I find the best research solution is probably to book it down to Enchantment 5 first, because Nemedian sorceresses can spam out skeletons very well. And of course, Enchantment 5 also gets you, where is it? It also gets you some other cool spells. Pale Riders that you can use to summon tons of chaff. Then you can take one step further for Arrow Fend to negate your weakness to arrows from wearing no hats. If you want to, you can also reanimate Z's, but I wouldn't say they're very useful. But at level 6, you can also get Rigor Mortis. And of course, your mages are less vulnerable to Rigor Mortis than most other people's, because they are spell singers, and so they take half fatigue. So Fomoria, basically Fomoria has a lot of strategies. A lot of ways you can build the nation, a lot of ways you can play the nation. Some people, even when it comes to expansion, there are multiple effective ways you can expand with this nation. Personally, I like to take a Regeneration Bless, as I said, and so I build the Baconator. Baconator is a thrice-horned boar, easily the most undercosted Pretender God chassis in the game at the moment. I give him Nature 7 and nothing else. Nature 7 lets me take a Regeneration Bless on him. He already has Recuperation, he berserks, and he's a trampler, so he can chew through indies with no trouble whatsoever, especially because his proc goes up to 21 when he berserks. And by carrying that Regeneration Bless, he turns unmarked into extremely good blockers. So what I'll do is something like this. I'll be recruiting unmarked and Nemedian warriors or Firbolg warriors with shields who have the higher defense skill. Alternated like this, that means that they will occupy the same square as each other. Their combat speeds are actually quite similar, 12 to 11, so they won't really separate much at all. When they go into combat, the Nemedian warriors or Firbolg spears will filter through between the unmarked and form a solid front, where hits are split randomly between them, the Nemedians, who have the high attack skill and the glamour and are very unlikely to take damage, and the unmarked, who will take damage slowly but will regenerate it back because they're regenerating 4 hit points per round. And when they hit back, they hit like trucks. They hit hard enough to kill a lot of early-age human units right through their shields. So that combination for me is very effective, and as you can see, I mean, like I said, I have 18 provinces right now. The Baconator is an extremely effective expander, as you can see by the fact that he has 262 kills right at the moment. And Firbolg druids, Fomorian druids like these, leading small expansion parties, 2 turns worth of this recruitment is as much as a Fomorian druid can lead. And then they can take these armies, and they can go conquer other provinces. So my god went like that, hopped over here, down this way, crossed over, and then took those provinces. My starting army took that, joined the god here, hopped up this way, got killed by elephants. And then Fomorian druids, leading other expansion parties, took those, took that, took those 2, and this province. So they've done pretty decent work. On top of that, like I said, because it's not honestly a terribly expensive strategy, I've been able to afford 3 more forts. And I was about to start building a second one. I'm a little bit short on that, so what I might do is this turn cancel out my troops and start a 4th fort right there. And I think that would be great. So we're upgrading the fortress here. We need to get a temple here. We need to get a temple and a lab there. We've got a lab and we're building a temple there. And our fortress will be upgraded. So pretty soon we'll be able to churn out more Fomorian druids. In terms of research, since you start off with a lot of air income. You start off with 1 air from Rath Chimbaith and 2 death. And then from the Isle of Balor you get another 2 air and 1 water. So you start off with 3 air gems per turn. I think it makes a lot of sense to grab Construction 2 early. Because that means that you can forge owl quills, which will boost your research. Your research isn't amazing. You can see my research right now is still very low, because of course I've been sending mages out to lead expansion parties. My research will be going up as I start to recruit mages at my other forts, but it's still going to take time. However, you can forge air quills with all of these air gems you've been accumulating. So right now, if I wanted to, I could forge 5 owl quills this turn, which would kick my research up by 25, and then 5 more next turn, which would kick my research up by another 25, and then I'd be down to about 1 per turn. But I could keep that 1 per turn going indefinitely while I continue site searching for more air sites. Nemedian sorceresses are fantastic site searchers, so we can search with them. Fomorian druids are great site searchers for air because they have air too, and then they also site search for a little bit of something else. So you find a lot of air gems, and you can turn those air gems into research very rapidly. That's why I'm comfortable taking Drain on this nation a little bit. I wouldn't want to take all that much, but Firbolg druids are already efficient researchers, and taking 1 point of Drain doesn't kill you. On this nation, I also really like to take luck. And the reason I really like to take luck is that your heroes are fantastic for Fomoria. So let's actually swap over in just a second here to the mod inspector, and I'll show you what I mean by the heroes. You also have some very cool summons as Fomoria, which inform your late game strategy. In general, in early game, I would say expanding with a pig, and then I do it with a mix of sacreds and basic infantry. Some people like to just expand with straight Nemedian warriors, because Nemedian warriors are very tough with the glamour and the high defense skill and all. I still think they ablate away a little bit too quickly. Some people like to expand just with straight Firbolg, and that's also doable. I once again find that you take a little bit too much attrition for my liking doing that. So I like to use the unmarked, but not everybody agrees with me there. So let's swap over to the mod inspector, and we'll take a look at what your national summons and such are. Alright, so here we are on the mod inspector. First thing, let's look at the heroes, and you can, I think, immediately see why I love these heroes. The Nemedian Queen is a massive rainbow mage with Death 3, Air 3. Not super impressive considering you already have Death 3, Air 3, but still a very powerful mage, and not by any means the strongest. The last Partholonian gives you Death 4 right off the bat, so if you get 2 on, he breaks you into skull faces immediately. The Uncursed is a powerful, Fomorian king chassis who also has nature magic, which is very powerful for a supercombatant, and he also has Awe 4. His weakness is that he has low morale, but that can be overcome in a variety of ways. And then the High King Balor, once again, breaks you into Death 4, is Holy 3, and has the Gaze of Death Soul Slay attack. It's armor, it's not Soul Slay. It's armor negating high damage, infinite precision, and its area of effect 20. Balor's Gaze of Death just wipes out everything he looks at. It is very impressive. It's the same attack that the Catoblepas has, actually, but Balor is a much more powerful chassis than the Catoblepas, and the Catoblepas is already not a cheap summon. 15 water gems. So Balor is incredibly powerful. The last Partholonian, Tuon, is incredibly powerful. Bress is very good, and Maka is very good. They're all fantastic heroes. The only downside is that they do have a turn arrival limit, so you can't get any of these 3 until after turn 10, and you can't get Balor until after turn 25, but still, worth it. Then in terms of summons, you have a couple of fairly unexceptional summons. You have some Black Dogs and some Barghests. Black Dogs, they're nothing much. They are stealthy and have dark power, and since you are a powerful Death Nation, casting Darkness is really easy for Fomoria. So under Darkness, they become fairly reasonable. Barghests are much better. They curse attackers, they have higher dark power, and they're sacred, so they can benefit from your Regeneration Bless. Even so, though, I still think you have better things to spend death gems on. They're not amazing. They're pretty good, but they're not amazing. Morrigans. Morrigans are the real deal. Morrigans are sacred, undead elves. I guess technically they're not undead, actually, but they have morale 30. Their stats in general are crazy high. They have glamour. Yeah, they are undead, I'm sorry. They fly, they have spirit sight, they have a life-draining weapon that also causes decay. They're amazing. And they have fear. The Morrigans are incredible units, and you can summon them permanently for 4 death gems each, which is worth it for the Morrigans. Now, you may be strapped on death gems, so you may not be summoning a whole lot of Morrigans. If you need chaff or something, Long Dead Horsemen work better. If you're still forging with all of your death gems, that's understandable. You may not summon a whole lot of Morrigans, but Fomoria has this spell, Dance of the Morrigans. This spell is Howl, except it summons Morrigans. So remember, Howl summons wolves. This spell is Howl, but with these instead. It's insane. Now, since the recent nerf in the last patch where Howl and other battle summoning spells had their frequency cut, it won't be quite as insane as it has been, but even so, even a few Morrigans appearing on the sides of the battlefield and randomly jumping into the enemy backline can be devastating, because these ladies are just very, very powerful units. The only weakness they have is relatively low protection, and honestly, for the early age, even so, their protection is not terribly low. Once again, they don't wear helmets, which is a little bit of a bummer, but they don't really need helmets. I mean, if they were defended against everything, they'd be crazily overpowered. So, late in the game, once they've hit Conjuration 8, Fomorian battles tend to include a lot of very high-level spells, because as I mentioned, the Nemedian sorceresses are really, really good at high-level spells. So early on, Fomoria's strategies are pretty simple. You go for Thunderstrike, you go for Skelespam, you summon Undead, etc., etc., etc. In the late game, however, your options open up tremendously because you have tons and tons of access to Air and Death. So, if we look at Air and Death high-level spells, Dance of the Morrigans, Wind of Death, which decays all living units, Vortex of Unlife. You've got, of course, you have where to go. Of course, you have little Fog Warriors. You have Darkness. Darkness is an incredibly powerful spell for Fomoria to cast, considering that most of your important units have either Spirit Sight or Dark Vision 50, and all of your Sacreds do. Bone Grinding, which is armor negating damage to everybody. Storms, of course. Living Clouds. You can spam a ton of Living Clouds if you want to saturate the whole place with air elementals, and if you then drop Fog Warriors after casting Living Clouds a bunch, now they're all mist formed, which makes them just even more terrifying. Ethereal plus mist form effectively means that nobody without a magical weapon ever does damage to them. You can cast Mass Flight, Rigor Mortis. Where's the other ones? Plague. Plague is a spell that not a whole lot of nations can or want to throw around willy-nilly, but Fomoria will absolutely blanket the battlefield in it. So, you've got all of these battlefield enchantments, Darkness, Rigor Mortis, Dance of the Morrigans, on top of all of these buffs, Mass Flight, Fog Warriors, on top of these summoning spells, and late game, Wind of Death, Wailing Winds, which is another spell that not many nations can cast, but Fomoria can, which will end a battle in a snap. There's a lot of stuff going on a late game Fomorian battlefield. Basically, once they've hit research levels 7 to 8 in a couple of things, which they can do pretty quickly because, once again, they can spam air quills very easily. Once they hit that research level, if Fomoria wants to win a battle, they will. They will cast all of these spells, lay them all down around about round 3 or 4. All of these spells will go off, and after that, it's the apocalypse. It's hard to stop. It is hard to stop a Fomorian stack once they've gotten to that research level if they're willing to spend the gems. And on top of that, you can't even tell when you're about to run into this trap, because remember, Nemedian sorceresses are stealthy, they're glamored, and so are Nemedian warriors. So you don't actually know where Fomoria's battlecasters are unless they choose to show you. All of this makes Fomoria a really powerful nation. It doesn't make them the best nation because they're very cap limited. They can only recruit Nemedian sorceresses from the capital, so they can only have so many. And they can only recruit Fomorian kings from the capital, which means they can only have so many of those. And those really are the things that they lean on. Fomorian druids are nice, but they don't have anything like the capacity that sorceresses and kings have. So, yes, mostly you're going to have Fomorian druids, but Nemedian sorceresses are actually going to be probably the majority of your combat power as Fomoria. And the occasional Fomorian king geared out for supercombatant duty or providing high-level air magic. If you don't happen to get an air magic random Nemedian sorceress, any Fomorian king can cast Storm, and it can be worthwhile to summon a couple of them, recruit a couple of them for that purpose alone. In the early game, as I said, you're going to lean mainly on just having better chaff than anybody else. I mean, the Furbolg are just really good. Furbolg slingers, of course, are unexceptional because they're slingers. I mean, what do you want? Slings in Dominions are bad. But Furbolg warriors, both kinds, are very, very solid. Unmarked with a regeneration bless are pretty solid. And Nemedian warriors are fantastic, but once again, expensive and capital only. So, mainly you're going to be leaning on the strength of the Furbolg in early wars. And then as time goes on, your Nemedian sorceresses just never stop getting better. They just get more and more powerful over time. In the late game, you'll be leaning on the death much more heavily. You'll be summoning Wraith Lords and Liches, which you can do quite easily. Like, worst case, if you don't get any heroes, if you didn't build your god for death, etc., etc., worst case, it costs you 1 empowerment on a death 3 random sorceress in order to get to Wraith Lords and Liches. And that's a price that anyone would pay. So, when it comes to building your god, then, what you want to build for is build for a strong early game so that you can get to that late game period where you're rampaging around with all of your summoned undead and your stealthy sorceresses and etc., and your supercombatants. Because once you get to that point, you're very, very powerful, but you kind of have to move through this earlier period where you don't quite have all those capabilities yet. So let's hop back into the game and talk about pretender design. Alright, so when you're designing a pretender god for Fomoria, you have a lot of options. You've got these are the Celtic options, basically. Unfortunately, not many of them are really very good. You do have some really good choices, but the Fomorian Sorcerer, I wouldn't bother. I would not get a Rainbow. I would not get a Titan. None of these Titans are actually very good. I wouldn't even really get an Immobile. I would restrict yourself to a monster, because like I said, as Fomoria, you want to have a very strong early game. That really leaves one option. You have the Thrice-Horned Boar, and the Thrice-Horned Boar, as I said, is the most undercosted Pretender God chassis in the game by far. This guy can take out pretty much any indie province with maybe you have to wait till Enchantment 2 to take out some of the really tough ones. He can't solo Thrones, obviously, because they'll summon elementals and stuff at him. They'll have wizards there, but he's got high hit points, high natural protection, Berserk 5, so he goes up to 21. He has recuperation already, and he's a trampler, plus he has 2 high-quality, high-damage attacks for anything he can't trample. So I would just click the pig for Fomoria. Other options. One thing I have experimented with, I did experiment with taking the Marigna. Because the Marigna, the way her paths split up, if you give her an extra path above what you have, all 3 of them get it. So the Marigna is a Trinity Pretender God. And so what that means is you get 3 of them, and their paths are divided differently depending on which one they are. So the Marigna start off with these 3, Air, Astral, and Death. You don't actually need any of those as Fomoria. But what you can do is, you can take the Marigna and give them Blood, and if you give them Blood 7, even when they're split up and their magic is maximally reduced, they still end up with Blood 4 each, which is enough for them to be very effective Blood Hunters. And so you can jumpstart yourself into Blood by using the Marigna. Downside, it's expensive as hell. It costs the earth to take the Marigna. So you end up with having to make very serious scales trade-offs, and it can be it hampers you in other ways. It doesn't give you a strong early game, and that's what you want for Fomoria. So I wouldn't do it. I did it once in a game and tried it out, and I actually did pretty well, but a lot of that was down to diplomacy as opposed to the strength of the technique, of the tactic. Overall, I would say it's a bad call. Your best call is the Thrice-Horned Boar. If you're really interested in going underwater, the Worm is a solid choice. You do need to give him Earth 6 and he can't take a Regeneration Bless, which makes your Sacreds weaker, but he can go underwater with Earth 6 immediately without caring. So, you just give him Earth 6. And that leaves you pretty decent points for other scales. I wouldn't take Misfortune 3 on Fomoria, like I said. I would definitely take Growth 3. And then you can afford to drop these just a little bit if you want. And you could even take Growth 3 and like a point of magic or something like that. These are perfectly solid scales for Fomoria. Or you can push up your Dominion a little bit more and take like another point of water. Or even leave it 4. And you can play around with it a little bit, but generally speaking, a worm with a hard skin bless will expand underwater just fine. Fear, regeneration, 20 prot, it works. It doesn't work as well on land as the boar, and you just kick it up to 7, and now, there you go, boom. Or like I said, you can take Drain 1, 0 those out. These are the scales that I was using in my test game, and they work wonderfully. Take regeneration. This guy can now rampage around with no fear whatsoever. You can build your little sacred expansion parties with no fear, and they'll take most independence. If they run into war elephants or something, they'll have some trouble, but still not a whole lot. And you can easily expect to get somewhere between 15 and 20 provinces year 0 with this build, which is certainly enough to make you look threatening, and enough to keep people from wanting to jump on you necessarily. You probably won't get ganged up on either, because you're not... Fomoria is not the most threatening early game nation. If there's a Mictlan in the game or something like that, they're likely to be the target. If there's a Therados in the game, definitely people are going to be concerned about them. Just because they're annoying. They're a pop kill nation. So with this kind of a big pig build, you can get away with this, and you can expand well, and you'll put yourself in a strong position going into that mid-game area where your powerful magic starts to come online. Like I said, your research is likely to be slow early on, especially with Drain 1. It won't be anything to write home about, but you have all that air income, so as soon as you hit Construction 2, your research will kind of spike, and then spike again, and then spike again as your air income goes up. In terms of strategy, early on I'd be recruiting mainly Firbolg Druids for basic research, with a couple of Fomorian Druids mixed in when you need another leader for a Sacred Expansion party. That'll be every 2 or 3 turns. After year 0, or near the end of year 0, I would switch to Numidian Sorceresses as your income goes up. You really want to start building up Numidian Sorceresses. They're not efficient researchers, and they will cost you in terms of upkeep. I keep clicking the wrong thing. Their upkeep is fairly high, but having them around is extremely valuable. They're good site searchers. They'll find you a lot of air and death gems, which is what you need. And they will, of course, form most of your battle mage core. Fomorian Druids, lot cheaper in terms of upkeep, so outside of the capital, definitely you want to amass some of these right before you go into battle, but when you're not expecting a war immediately, you can throw out some Firbolg Druids instead. They're a lot cheaper, they'll let you mass up more troops and build more infrastructure, and they're almost as good at research. You're missing out on 2 points, which can easily be made up with air quills. So that's Fomoria. They're a strong, strong nation. Their strength really increases as time goes on. They're backloaded in terms of power. Once they start hitting those research levels 6, 7, 8, then they become very, very dangerous. The schools that you're looking to research for them in order to become dangerous like that are, of course, Enchantment, Horde of Skeletons, Rigor Mortis, and Life After Death. Life After Death is a fantastic spell for Fomoria. Alteration is a good one as well because you want that Alt 7 for Fog Warriors. It also opens up Bone Grinding and Darkness, which are great death spells for you. And then, of course, Conjuration. Conjuration 8 gets you your Dance of the Morrigans, which is kind of your end-game superpower move. Especially if you can throw down a couple of Divine Blessings after you've cast Dance of the Morrigans. That's incredibly effective. You don't have any recruitable Holy 3, unfortunately. Your Fomorian Kings are only Holy 2. So you do have to get some Holy 3 from somewhere in order to bless those Morrigans, and that can be a real challenge. Your best bet is the heroes. Some of your heroes are Holy 3, but Baelor especially I'm thinking of. Beyond that, in order to get Holy 3, you would have to forge... You'd have to have your Prophet on the field, or you would have to forge the Holy Boosters and give them to a Fomorian King. So I probably wouldn't worry about that too much. But if you have your Prophet around, and prophetizing a Fomorian King is a great idea, by the way. If you have your Prophet around, yeah, by all means, start spamming Divine Blessing after you've cast Dance of the Morgans. So as they come onto the field, you start giving them that regeneration, and they start regenerating 2 or 3 hit points a turn. So that is Fomoria. Hope this has been somewhat helpful for you. Like I said, they're a great nation. I really, really like them. They're one of my favorite early era nations, to be sure. In fact, I think they're one of my favorite too. Ulm and Fomoria are my top 2 in the early age. They've got a lot of cool stuff going for them. They've got powerful elf troops, they've got powerful giants, which of course you know I love, and they've got really, really effective mages. So they kind of have it all. The only downside to them is that their stuff tends to be a little bit expensive, but honestly, this build right here gives you pretty decent income. If you wanted to be, like, fully meme-ish, Fomoria is one of the nations where you could potentially get away with full scales, if you're lucky. I probably wouldn't. Like, I don't think this would be a good idea for Fomoria, but Fomoria could carry it off, because they have the Fomorian kings, they have the Nemedian sorceresses, they have the high-quality troops. If you wanted to pull an Althea and go with a full scales meme, yeah, it could work. So that's even that's a possibility, and I wouldn't be... If I saw Fomoria with this build, I would kind of be scared. I would be thinking, well, okay, so we have to stop, this has to be stopped, like, early, or it's gonna, in the late game, it's just gonna be overwhelming power. But in any case, thanks for watching. Like I said, hope this has been helpful. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and whether you did or not, I will see you in the next one. So take care until then.